got a couple case studies here which illustrate some of these concepts that we've been talking about. The first is from the Nature Conservancy. As probably most of you know, they're a nationwide, maybe even worldwide organization that looks to preserve land and preserve the biodiversity in the environment. And for many years, they were measuring their performance on really two things, two primary measures. The first was how many acres of land were they preserving, and then how much money they were raising. So those are the two things that they report on each year as their highest level measures of performance. But then they realized that, that's not really conveying or focusing the organization on what's most important to it. And they went through some analysis and planning, and they really came up with a change where they said, what we're really trying to improve is the biodiversity of the environment. Buying land and preserving land is the way we do it. It's our activity. It's important to monitor that, but what we're really trying to do is improve biodiversity. And we also want to minimize the threats to biodiversity and the environment. So it changed their whole way of measuring performance. Now each project has a variety of ways that they assess whether the project itself is improving the biodiversity of the environment and reducing threats. Now they still track how many acres, but it's not the primary result they're trying to achieve. They may preserve fewer acres and actually do a better job at biodiversity preservation. Another very interesting case study of this concept of looking at trying to define results and some of the complexities in doing that comes from an organization called Engineers Without Borders. They're organized, I believe, by country, and what they do is raise money for generally infrastructure projects like water systems, and then they have engineers go out and install water systems in developing countries. They have other projects, but that's a common one. And the Canadian chapter of Engineers Without Borders a number of years ago said, gee, we ought to go out and we put in a lot of these water systems. We ought to go and check to see what's really happening with them. And I think they raised some money. They went out and they did a research project. And they found that a large percentage of their projects, when they went and visited 5 years after it was, or some time period after it had been installed, that a lot of the water system was no longer functioning. And, they looked into why that was happening. And there's a great video of some of that research and this wonderful story, eye-opening story of engineer talking with one of the elders in a village about, well, why isn't this water spigot working? And then noticing there's another water spigot a couple of yards away that wasn't on their map. And they asked, well, what is that? And he says, oh, that's the water system that the Americans installed 10 years ago. So they realized that just installing water systems and getting them running wasn't really achieving the impact that they expected. So they learned from that, and it's an interesting case study because they have incorporated admitting failure as part of their culture to look at what didn't work and correct it so that they can do a better job in the future. And that ended up with a much better effort, more effective at measuring impact. So now they not only look at were the projects installed and functional as they were designed, so that they put them in, and when they turned things on, everything was working properly. But they also now are looking at the maintenance being successfully performed on them and the capacity of the community to maintain the system after it's been installed. So now they have a much better understanding of what the impact they're trying to achieve is, and they're doing a much better job at measuring that. And you can see from these numbers doing an excellent job at that. So let's go through the monitoring process. And again, this is from the board perspective, and we'll use monitoring for results or outcomes as the example. But this process can be applied to some of the operational limitations measures that the board may want to be monitoring. So it starts with establishing what the outcomes or results that the board expects. We've just been talking about that. It's very important that the board reach agreement on what those are. And even if the results get created or are proposed by the CEO, the board needs to be in agreement that, yes, this is what we're expecting out of the organization. And that takes some time. Next, this gets into the practical aspects of this, is the need to develop an operational interpretation of the outcomes. Often at the board level, you're establishing the outcomes in a broad sense that establishes clearly where you want to go, but it doesn't precisely define how you measure that. So you may say something like, you want our participants in the program to have improved health, but you don't say how much improved health, and you don't define what that means in the real world. So the next step in this is to develop an operational interpretation. And this is something generally done, expected of the CEO, where they say, here's what you've said to the board. The board has said, we'd like to achieve in a general terms. Here's how I interpret it in a practical, real world situation. And this is what I propose as being an acceptable performance level. So on health, you may want to talk about infection rates or that sort of thing as a practical interpretation. Then with that definition, you gather the evidence and review it regarding the performance, and then make a determination whether the outcome is being met or not. After that, it's important for the board to take some action. And if things are going well, the outcomes are being achieved as you expected, then just accepting the report, you then have it on record that the CEO is doing a great job, the organization is performing as you expected. But certainly, and maybe even often, you will find that the report shows that the ends are not being fully met. And then it's important for the board to determine what sort of action do we need to take here. And that may be something as simple as asking the CEO to go back and come back with a plan for improving performance to what you would like to have happen. But that feedback loop of making a decision at the board level, is this performance meeting what we expected or not? And if not, what do you expect the organization to do as a result? And this is the critical part of holding a CEO accountable. The board has three basic methods for monitoring. So the first is a CEO report, and this is probably the most common, where you expect the CEO to report on the performance, and they provide that information to you. But you can also go outside of the organization and have some independent party do the review for you. And so this is very common, of course, in the financial area, where you have your annual financial audit and asking an independent auditing firm to come in and look at the books and provide you their assessment about whether everything is in order or not. But you can also have the board do the inspection itself. For example, if there's a requirement that the organization operate with a personnel manual that lays out all the rules for staff, because not having one would be an imprudent action in today's world. You may actually have your HR committee go and look at the manual and say, okay, do you have it? And look through it and see if it meets the basic standards. So these are the three basic methods. And again, to reinforce this, you have to establish the policy, your outcomes that you want, or on the operational side, the limitations you don't want violated, an interpretation in a practical sense of what that means, reviewing the evidence, determining whether you're in compliance or not, and then depending upon that, either accepting the monitoring or taking some action to improve performance, correct any deficiencies you might come across.